every single day, there's stuff that we need to process, get healing in.
How do you know the men in your life are okay?
Severely depressed.
Yes.
Severely grieving.
Yeah.
In a placement but functioning, but at the same time, there's this internal turmoil.
The fact that we are functioning does not mean we are fine.
Man, give us the gist of what can people expect?
Well, I think, we take for granted when it comes to Father's Day that it's always a day of celebration for men and women alike, but specifically dealing with men, because what women commonly do organically, men sometimes struggle in terms of communication, talking about grief, loss, and just having dealt with men for so long, we were kind of having a discussion, and tonight will just be a sneak peek on a lot of the conversations that Cedric and I have on the phone. And he always threatens to press the button and go live when we're talking. But there's such a richness that comes when brothers connect and we communicate. And there's a gap a lot of times in the body of Christ and at large in terms of men connecting, communicating, especially when it comes to loss and grief. But moving in and out of men for so many years, I think what came to the head is that how many of us are dealing with grief on some level. And sometimes you may not necessarily be grieving the loss of a loved one, although many of us are. You may be grieving the loss of a job. You may be grieving a transition. You may be grieving the loss of a relationship, a marriage. You may be grieving the loss of a child. Whatever it is, a lot of times we do not give audience to our grief, what it looks like to walk through it, because we get right back to functioning. But the fact that we are functioning does not mean we are fine. And that's the deception a lot of times, that the people around us, they see us, we're moving and we're doing, but that does not mean that we're okay just because we're high functioning. And a lot of times for us, the more that we're grieving, the more that we throw ourselves into function.
Okay, so go back. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead. No, come on.
Oh, you flowing so strong. I mean, so say that. So say that one more time, just
Which
because
part?
we are all of it, right? But specifically.
So the last part was,
you just gonna act like you didn't drop a bar right there. That was a whole bar. Like
we're just talking.
Yeah.
The fact that we are functioning,
right, that part
doesn't mean that we're fine.
Wow.
Digging into writing and different things like that, one of the things that was alarming was seeing how our suicide rates are so much higher, but they're also so much more surprising, because people look at men a lot of times in the mix of our functionality, and they think because we're functioning and then we're gone the next day, the first thing that you hear is they were fine.
Sure. You hear that a lot.
Yeah, they were just fine. I was just talking to them. They were just at work yesterday. They were just doing this. And so my question becomes, how do you know they were fine? How do you know the men in your life are okay?
That's so good. Can you identify what grief is? Right. So I think you spoke to it. You said loss.
Yeah. I mean, I think grief at its core is loss. Sure. And it's not necessarily the loss of an individual. It can be the loss of a job. It can be loss of a dream, a career, a vision, a child, a relationship. But it's at its core, it's to lose something. Connection, mentor, especially when you occupy leadership spaces, we have often experienced more betrayal than, people would ever. We've forgotten more betrayal than more people will experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we just have to go through it.
You got to go through it because you got people waiting on you and that need you.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a rush to get back to the people that need me, whether it's wife, whether it's children, whether it's the people that are lead, the people that you pastor. If you're a business owner, right? You're paying salaries, you're doing all these different things. So our society at large does not allow for time in terms of the grief process.
So we're pressured to keep going, especially as men, and to keep going, to keep functioning. To the women out there as well, there is this thing that really, from the outside, people don't really care how we're doing. Chris, when we ask the question, hey man, I think me and you encountered that today. You were like, how you doing? I said I was going to open my mouth. I'm telling, okay, so we're going to have a transparent conversation. This is going to be the one. But the automatic, unthought response in our society is when somebody asks you how you are doing, you're supposed to say, I'm good.
Yeah.
And we've made up things like, what ain't good is getting better.
Yeah.
And in the church, it's like, blessed and highly favored.
Blessed and highly favored. You know what I mean? I'm not where I want to be, but thank God I'm not where I used to be.
All of the things.
It's all deflection. It's all It's all an escapism. It's all anesthetizing. And sometimes we can anesthetize, even with scripture, how we utilize the Bible in our lives. We can jump to a scripture so much that it becomes a cliche that we really don't believe anymore.
Because it's not heart level.
That's right. And
it's cognitive.
Yes.
But it hadn't reached the heart.
It hadn't reached the heart. So if it has not reached the heart, there can be no transformation.
Yep.
And so that's why we exist in certain spaces for years, because it has not reached the heart.
But we're hurting. There are some people that are actually hurting and severely depressed and severely grieving and severely anxious.
Yeah.
And in a placement but functioning. But at the same time, there's this internal turmoil that is happening on the inside. And so can we speak to this? That maybe we're going here too soon, but keep going. I won't do that just yet.
Well, no, it's fine. And you mentioned depression. Depression does not look the same on everybody.
That's good.
My father used to always talk to me about, we had family members that were roofers.
Yeah.
But they were alcoholics.
Right.
But they could lay a roof while drunk.
At the same time.
At the same time.
For sure.
So the people that needed them to lay a roof would never know.
Yeah.
That they had this issue. And so
don't make that turn. Don't make that turn. I know my brother. I know where you're going with this. Before you even say it, I know where you're going. It's the truth. So do y'all want a transparent conversation, or you just want surface tonight? What y'all want?
What you want?
Because he can return the corner right here.
So you can be functioning in your gifting.
Wow.
And completely dysfunctional at the same time.
At the same time.
You can be a pastor. You can be a prophet. You can be a singer. You can be a business owner. Whatever your gifting is, you can be functioning at a high level.
Yes, sir.
You can be packing out stadiums. You can be an athlete, whatever the case may be.
Singing at the top of your game.
At the height of celebration, and be right at the point of breaking.
Absolutely.
Because you're hurting. And so what happens is, we know the Bible teaches that all good and perfect gifts come from above, but it flows through our flesh. This will, this mind, this emotion, it flows through that soulish realm. So when you got turmoil going on in that realm, you can start off preaching and end up venting. And you will end up misusing your platform in a way that God never intended for you to use. Why? Because you were not willing to go somewhere, hush for a moment, speak to the right individuals, be healed, be restored, be set free. But because you are high functioning, You got right back into the work. Got to go here, got to go here, got to do this. And everywhere that you go, you're spreading this disease because your soul is not healthy. You're grieving, you're hurting, you're snapping, you're angry, you're upset, you're confused. And especially in the church, when you have a calling that involves your voice, you have really got to be careful that you don't allow that grief and that hurt. And I don't care who did it. I don't care how long it, if you don't deal with it, you will pervert the message that God gave you in order to vent how you feel.
Because we can't remain in spirit all the time.
You can't.
Because we're tripart. We're spirit, soul, and body.
Right.
So God may give us a spiritual, like you said, a spiritual message, but it has to filter through your soul. So this is why he says, work out. I don't mean to make it biblical.
No,
work out, and highly biblical, because we're not doing an exegesis, but work out your soul salvation.
That's
and I think many times we're looking at that and we don't know really how to holster that particular scripture. But every single day, there's stuff that we need to process and get healing in and work out your soul. Why did it say that? Your soul, my mind, my will, my emotions, because there's certain stuff that happens, these traumas and these griefs and these things that we deal with in our families, on the job, and this, that, the other, that we need to process through. And everything can't be a click track and a organ or and don't get me to talking about let's go back. I think a lot of gifted men in this case, but also women, hide under their gift.
Sure.
So if I'm in ministry, right, if I'm high functioning and all eyes are on me, but I'm dealing with a soul issue and there's some trauma or something like this present in my life, how do I get help but keep healing?
So whether you have a Mercedes-Benz or a Toyota Camry, you got to get that oil changed. You cannot escape an oil change. I don't care how fast your car goes. I don't care how big your vehicle is. I don't care how expensive it is. I don't care how cheap it is.
Yeah.
We all have to get that oil changed. And you cannot continue to put clean oil into a dirty filter.
Wow.
That engine is going to lock up eventually.
Yeah.
So if you don't take the time to change that oil and change the filter,
and
you got to do both.
Yeah.
And so the practical is,
good.
We believe in the oil of God and therapy. How we got a doctor, we got a cardiologist, right?
Yeah.
We got somebody for our diabetes. We got somebody for our gout. We got somebody for every condition that we have at this mind.
Wow.
Except someone to talk through, man, I need another voice. I need to work some things out mentally. It does not negate the power of prayer.
Yeah.
But one of the characteristics of God was he's the wonderful
counselor.
So how is it we are so comfortable seeking out help for every part of our being except?
Yeah.
It's stigma. It's stigma.
It is. And in some cases, it's cultural, because what happens in this house will stay in the house, and I don't know who I can entrust.
Sure.
Or with all of the things. So whatever the reasons are, like you're saying, is keeping us from getting the help.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the partnership to really deal with something beyond the gift.
And that's all valid. Like, I'm not negating the negative experiences we have had from communicating with the wrong individuals. I don't know anybody that hasn't gone through that. But see,
they told you this.
Say it again.
They told your business.
They told your business. But
They
see,
went
that
out
is,
yeah.
yeah, that's the value though. Just like with our bodies, going to a professional, there was such great value in communicating and talking through. And we know that a lot of times we have our solutions, but there is extreme value in talking to somebody that does not have an emotional investment in anything you have to say.
Woo. Unpack that.
Let me say it again. There is great value in talking to someone that does not have an emotional investment in what you have to say. So a lot of times what we learn in the midst of communicating with family and friends, we learn that anything I say can and will be used against me at a future date. And so it causes us to lock up and we say, I'm not going to talk to nobody.
Right.
That's not a solution either. You just need to redirect certain conversations to someone that you know has signed paper to say,
sure,
this doesn't go any further.
Absolutely.
Just like your doctor.
Yeah.
You know that when I communicate with my doctor, this is not going any further. If somebody want to know what happened to my toe, I got to tell them.
Absolutely. And I think for that reason, because we are so, and it's not because people want to, pain would drive a person to do things that they wouldn't ordinarily do.
Sure.
I remember years ago, man, I was working in a mental health facility. That's what I want to be careful what I was saying here. And there was a gentleman, I remember he was a gentleman that was in there. Of course, there were girls and there were boys, but this was one of the 15, 16 boys that were present.
Yeah.
Well, he couldn't go on the field trip that particular night, and it was storming.
Yeah.
So my job was, and this is way, way back, right? When I came through college, and that's what, my job just to have some change and stuff like that, striving college student to stay above water. And
yeah.
And so Chris, man, it was a storm. It was just me and him. And he started saying some stuff under his breath. I was like, okay, I was used to it. Mental health facility.
Right.
Storm. I did not know that one of his triggers was weather.
Wow.
Because the weather was attached to a traumatic experience in his past.
Wow.
So when he started saying stuff, I tried to comfort him. Right. I was there and, man, are you okay? Is everything all right? Let's go watch some TV. Yeah, let's come from around this window looking at the storm and the lightning coming down and hearing the big bang. So when I reached out, God is my witness, when I reached out to touch him on his back, I said, man, it's going to be okay. Let's just go watch some TV. He bit me.
Wow.
The thoughtfulness that I had to comfort him, he interpreted it as something traumatic because of his previous experience.
That's a whole lesson right there. That's a whole lesson, because the people that we love, the men in your life, it is important that you learn their triggers. Now, we're having a conversation about men, but it's important for the women in your life too. In any relationship, it is really important in that discovery phase that we have conversations about your triggers.
So good.
Because I need to understand how and if I can help you when you're triggered.
Yeah.
Because here's the reality. I may just need to allow some time to pass until you're ready to have a discussion. And it's relevant to grief because a lot of times when a loved one is grieving or experiencing loss, we tend to do what we think they need. We tend to give and say what we think they need, or we say what we would want to hear rather than what they need to hear. Or how about this? Sometimes it's not what you say, it's just your presence they need.
Sure.
And especially from men, we talk or we don't. So when we're ready to talk, we're going to talk. And you won't be able to shut us up. And don't try to. But if we're not ready and you push, the response that you receive is going to be unkind. Why? I'm still cooking this thing. And you're opening the oven on a meal that's not ready to be served. So a lot of times, one of the differences, and it's tough to make generalizations, we're not all the same. We are not homogenous, but we do have similarities. Most men will process it internally before we say it, because we grew up in environments where we were penalized for saying it wrong.
Absolutely.
So as we get older, we'll spend more time thinking about it. Sometimes we'll think months, years about a thing, and then we'll just be like, you know what? I got it.
Yeah.
And we'll just start talking. It's weird, but I explained why that happens is because most of us, we grow up in environments where we were penalized for saying it the wrong way. Not necessarily in your home, but it could have been in the school. If you were an athlete, it could have been on your teams. You know, you had to say things, you had to do things the right way. So a lot of times where women, they think and talk at the same time, and brothers just like, what do I do with this? Do I respond or?
Because we got to think about that for a minute.
Right, because our complex is to fix something. So we're looking for, okay, what do you need me to fix? And a lot of times women don't need us to fix anything. They just need us to listen. But we got the Superman complex that we like to fix things. And that's why grief is so difficult for us, because it is the thing that we can't fix immediately.
So we got this issue or these issues, and then we have social media. Why do we say so much are we misappropriating or mismanaging conversations that we probably need to have in other spaces? But why do we feel safe on social media to disclose such sensitive topics and matters that are so close to us personally? I've never really understood that.
Man, that's a great question. I would love to hear some thoughts in the chat. I see you all in the comments. Why do we take things to social media rather than a journal, a counselor, a wise mother, a wise father? Why does it become something that we put out publicly? Drop it in the comments. What do you think?
Yeah, we want to hear y'all.
This is an interactive session here.
State the question one more time, bro.
Why do we take our emotions to social media rather than taking them to a counselor, to a confidant, to a wise mother, to a wise father, a mentor? Why do we take it public rather than private?
All right, here's Portia.
Okay.
Portia, thank you for being on tonight. She says, I think because people feel like they don't have to be accountable for what they say on social media.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Portia, say more about that, because we learned that the eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the good
and the evil. You had to holler on the last part. The evil. Yes,
right. Okay, she said it feels like it's no judgment.
Okay, there it is. Got it.
Interesting. I guess my response would be, I think it's important for us to understand that we are accountable for everything we say and write. Because what can happen, especially, and I'm always kind of starting from the top and working down, we can cause people to stumble by talking about something publicly that we really haven't processed yet. So what we end up doing, and once again, this is from a leadership perspective, we end up cultivating confusion sometimes through unprocessed emotions that the immature may not be able to make sense of.
That's a bar.
What do you think?
No, that's perfectly said. I like this short and sweet comment, Diane, because I don't think we really want help. We just want attention sometimes. And I'm not going to put myself in that. Poor friends done that, so let me just back out of that because I got personal there. But I'm just like, why? Nobody else would know it if you didn't post that.
Yes.
Surely there's some other kind of way that you could have handled this, but you put it to people that you haven't met one single day in your life. I think you're onto something there.
You know, something that's fascinating. Some people enjoy the attention from being wounded rather than freedom that comes from being healed.
Bar.
Some people love the attention from being wounded.
Yeah.
Rather than the freedom that comes from being healed. And so when I first got into ministry, I assumed everybody that came to church wanted to be saved.
Right.
Shock of my life.
Yeah.
I assumed everybody wanted to be healed, delivered, and set free. And so one of the things that's shocking is that you learn that some people like their demons.
Right.
I like my limp. I want this crutch.
Sure.
And
because
so,
it takes work.
Go ahead, say it.
Because it actually takes work to be healed.
Absolutely.
And I want you to do the work, preacher.
Right.
The most work I want to do in church is high-fiving my neighbor.
That's it.
But when it comes to me actually having to take something home and work on it and make healthy habits and consistently change perspectives and mindsets, I was good when you were talking about working on them. Folks say, this is word. I can think of somebody that this is for. No, baby, this thing is in you. I mean, there's nothing that. But when it comes to working on us, I think the challenge is there because it's like, I've been masking this, but now I have to actually allow God to come in and do some manicuring.
Yeah.
And not just surface level.
Yeah.
Down stuff that we've carried for years.
Yeah.
Come on, as men, we've got daddy issues, mama issues, childhood issues, dark skin complexion issues, light skin complexion issues, financial, so we have to deal with some of the stuff that may be present in our adulthood, but sometimes that really requires going back and addressing stuff that the adult us is holding because of the child us.
Sure.
And that takes work.
It takes work. Yeah. And I think sometimes it becomes easier to be identified by our issue. We literally have worn this issue so long, it becomes our identity.
Wow.
What was the woman with the issue of blood's name?
Some say Tabitha, but we don't know.
We don't really know. And we do the same thing sometimes as men.
Absolutely.
We take on these identities that are unhealthy, and it becomes easier for us to wear that dysfunction.
Sure.
rather than to release that thing and really walk in the identity that God has called us to be. So that's moving into a whole nother thing, but
That's just how he is.
yeah. So a lot of times the reason that he's flipping tables and you label him as angry because they labeled him as angry, and then he wears the identity of an angry person. But like you were just saying, that there comes a time where he has to go back and do the work. And he would realize that I got stuck at one stage of this grief thing, and it was anger.
Wow.
And when you really do the work, you realize he lost something, and he could have lost it in his childhood.
Sure.
Like, who left you?
Yeah.
Where did you experience loss? Where did you experience disappointment? And who abandoned you in this grief process that you got stuck at anger? And so you put that cloak on and you've been wearing this now for 20 years, but you're mad that you lost your father.
Sure.
It's a conversation.
Bishop Chatham has chimed in. Hey, Bishop, what's going on, man?
Bishop.
He says most people like the affirmation of other people and never really want to deal with it, but they always look for other people to validate their problems.
Wow. That's that wisdom.
Yes,
and so
sir.
we end up spending a lot of time on social media talking about the issue because we have no interest in a solution.
Could it be?
So one thing you learn working on the back end of social media, that the algorithm favors negativity.
Absolutely. Drama.
It favors it. Anything with positivity will be suppressed. But the algorithm, the algorithm favors negativity. It feeds on it. And so what happens? The more negativity that happens under a post, the post comes up.
Sure.
It's lifted higher. It's magnified.
Oh, magnify
the Lord
with me. So that's why he's asking for magnification, because there's so much out there that's being magnified.
This the devil.
And it will almost make healing unpopular. No, it will almost make doing things God's way unpopular and make you not want to do it, because here is this socialization issue that if I want to be liked, then I have to be in the drama circle. If I want to be liked, then I have to do things this way. And that's the culture. The culture is highly traumatic. And the more traumatic you are, then the more popular you are. Well, if you're inundated with popularity, then it's like, I don't need to work on me. I'm good.
Because you're getting this constant validation from people that are just as wounded as you.
Sure.
But validation and affirmation can quickly become dysfunction.
Yeah.
Why is reality TV so big?
Yeah.
It's drama. It is dysfunction all day long.
Yeah.
I remember the first reality show was Real World. You remember this?
Real World. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, Real World was it was the group of college kids.
And I don't think we saw that. We was everybody on here was saved. We didn't
saved. I know you never saw that. This came on MTV. You had to sneak and watch it. But it was one show.
Real World. I remember that.
One show. And then bring us to 2025. There are reality shows on every network.
Absolutely.
And it's all dysfunction. But you just said it. They're all popular.
Yeah.
And so now it sends the message to the social media world. This is how you get popular, by being dysfunctional. Healing is no longer popular. Wearing your wounds, acting out, being dramatic, flipping tables, all the works of the flesh. That's what's popular. That's what's going to move you up in the algorithm. And so our lives now revolve around likes and shares and comments.
We've got relationships that are based on AI and
We
likes and
think
shares.
social media is real.
We don't even know how to do
No.
relationship anymore
No.
because we've been doing social media so long. In reality, Chris, if you got an issue with me,
Right.
don't hide behind the screen.
But that's what we do.
Don't hide behind the screen and shoot shots.
But that's what we do. We call it, what is it? Subtweeting.
Yes, sir. Yep.
We'll go live and talk about the person that we're mad at instead of, and so I'm not even talking about the world right now. I'm talking about the church. I'm talking about believers. Instead of, you know what? Let me do what the Bible says. And it tells me that if I got an issue with Cedric, I should go to Cedric. If I know Cedric has an issue with me, I should go to Cedric. Hey man, what's going on? But our first instinct is to turn on the live.
Yeah.
Like this is why we had to stop testimony service in a lot of churches, because it became an occasion to vent and throw off on people. You're supposed to be talking about the goodness of the Lord, what God did for you. And you so busy talking about your haters. Who cares?
Right.
If you're functional, if you're in your purpose, there are going to be detractors.
Keep moving.
You called to preach the gospel, preach the gospel. Why are you using the pulpit to call out people? That's not what that's for. That's not why God gave you influence. Preach the gospel.
Sure.
You in business, do business. You don't have to announce everything you're going to do. Here's the one I'm finna cut people off. Why are you announcing that? Who cares? But see, a lot of times this is unprocessed emotion, grief, guilt,
trauma. Yeah.
And this is how it manifests.
Yeah.
Right. This is how it comes out.
Because we don't have any healthy space to take it. And then we haven't worked on our filter. So this is why when scandals happen, or when people of high influence in whatever realm or industry hit, the news, it's like, whoa.
Right.
No, not them. How did that happen? What took place there?
Yeah.
Back to what you said, highly gifted.
Sure.
But an unprocessed soul.
Yeah.
Chris, I've had to process.
We all have.
I've had to process. I know you've had to process. Those that we're listening to have had to process. So let's not make this about them up the street, down the hill, and around the corner. And I know we're having a personal conversation, y'all.
Yeah.
But my father was a man's man. And I know we're finishing up here. He was a man's man.
Yeah.
Passed on now.
Yeah.
But a week before he passed, I think I told you this, he called me as he was in a rehabilitation facility. And he says, I'm getting out of here.
Wow.
He says, I'm getting out of here. And he broke down crying, which that generation.
Yeah.
Oh my God. What?
Right.
To show emotions? It didn't happen.
Sure.
Not very often.
Sure.
And the first thing he said was, he says, before I get out of here, if anything happens, I want you to know that I hadn't always been the best father.
Wow.
He says, but I tried.
Yeah.
He said, I want you to be better than I was.
Wow.
That thing did something to me, man. It put some salve down in my chest, brother.
Sure.
To hear him say that, because for the majority of my life, it was make it happen, But he got to a vulnerable point.
Yeah.
In his life where he was like, none of that matters.
Yeah.
You're my son. Let me tell you what you need to know.
Yeah.
Let me take off this mask and all of this masculine energy to let you know what you need to know, so that a 40-plus-year-old guy can receive a fraction of healing.
Sure.
because we were taught, yeah, man, don't do that.
Sure.
And how it affected parts of my life and my relationship and marriage and, and all of these and my leadership, because I had to uphold what I thought manhood was, when in reality, you can be strong, but fragile at the same time.
So how did that conversation change your definition of what it meant to be a man?
Honestly, there were some things that I grew up with that, although we had everybody in the household unit, I said, this is what I will perpetuate. This is what I won't. So I started loving on my boys, hugging them. They tell me before they go to sleep every night, as grown as they are, Dad, I love you. Hugging them, affirming them, talking with them, being vulnerable with them, sharing the accomplishments, but also stripping down and being like, hey, I didn't do so well in this area. Learn from my successes, but also my mistakes. So I think that his saying that redefined what I felt I had to be.
Sure.
And so after he said that, there was a weight that was lifted.
Wow.
And people had to tell me, listen, you're being a little too transparent at this point. Don't share that. I'm like, I'm free now. I don't care. For all the men that are listening, for all the ladies that are listening, I believe we have a nature and God has created us a certain way, but I think we've adopted a whole lot from our environment.
Yes.
Culturally and in other spaces, the real us is really trying to get out. And we just need a place that's safe enough to be able to foster who that real person is, because many of us, we haven't met him yet.
What made you struggle to communicate?
Pastoring did a number on me. You get me? I started pastoring when I was 22.
Wow.
And I grew up around older pastors. You didn't tell your business, all the things that you do. But I think the job of pastoring, the calling of pastoring, affected my ability to pastor my relationships.
Say more about that.
Yeah. So the role of me pastoring people sometimes affected my transparency at home. Affected my transparency with other relationships in my life. And I think that when you have a role and you're conditioned to, because you have to, right? You can't be a pastor and just be loose lipped and all the things. You have to consolidate what people know, how they know, what they see, and all the things. But at the same time, if you take that into your marriage, if you take that into the relationship with your kids, if you take that into the relationship with your friends, then they feel like you're very abstract.
Sure.
Okay. And so it took a minute just to, achieve some level of balance as the pastor, as the husband, as the father, because there were many different hats. And so for men that are balancing many different hats and roles, and you're trying to be the best that you can be as a man, it could be pretty difficult, Chris.
Do you? I think sometimes we find that we're partitioning our conversations and information so many times we're constantly assessing who can handle what.
Yeah.
In what quantity, at what time, in what capacity. Right. These are things that are constantly going through our mind. And then so a lot of times when you're balancing all of that from a leadership perspective, your emotions move to the back.
Absolutely. So I was around older leaders that were professional, but they were emotionless. They were callous. They had been doing it so long until they had been hurt so many times and wounded so many times until it's like, who are you?
Sure.
Where is he at?
Sure.
Great leaders.
That's not the issue.
That take away from
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Right.
I compare leadership sometimes to the ER. Sometimes when you go to the ER and you deal with a doctor, they can come off real callous.
Yeah.
My toe is killing me. And that's your whole world. That's your whole perspective, is the pain in your toe. It's not until you step back and realize, man, he just lost 5 lives tonight.
Right.
And so he's coming into your situation from a whole different perspective. And he's just like, it's a toe, man. You all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's falling off. I had a head fall off 5 minutes ago. It's not a big deal. Perspective, though.
Perspective.
And a lot of times leadership can push you into a place of callousness because, in all honesty, when you're marrying and burying, your perspective can quickly become so distorted.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly dealing with someone else's trauma.
Yeah.
And in all reality, leaders rarely experience the grace they extend.
Wow.
It's rare.
Wow.
So
That's
people can know your loss, they can know your pain, but my toe. I need to talk to you 45 minutes about my toe.
Yeah.
So I think that if I could leave everybody with something, just based on what Cedric just said, whatever conversations you need to have,
man. Please.
Like, have them. Because there is closure and healing and salve for your heart. I had some amazing conversations with my dad that we can discuss at a later time before he passed, but it was healing for both of us. We both needed it. I cannot imagine my father transitioning without having had certain conversations. And I think that they don't necessarily have to be long, deep, but sometimes they are just things that have been withheld.
Yeah.
Because of the manhood that we were dealing with at the time. And the closer you transition to glory, man, your perspective shifts.
My God.
And a lot of that pride and that I ain't talking to him, I don't want to talk, all that stuff just kind of dissipates. It just dissipates. And with my father, he just started releasing things.
Yeah.
He would talk about it for a little bit, and then he would just say, it's all right. So many people owed him money. So many people had abandoned him, forgotten about him. So many things had happened. And, you know, my father and I, we always had a great relationship where we talked. And he was just kind of talking through different things, life experiences, hurt, disappointment, betrayal. And it helped me understand him more towards the end of our life together. And I just, you get older and you're like, I get it now. I understand it now. Isaiah said his was short and sweet, but he needed to know how his dad really felt. That's it. It don't have to be a lot. But once they're gone, I cannot tell you how many people I have met from a ministerial standpoint that are angry at people that are no longer here.
Man.
Upset.
Yeah.
And if they had just had that conversation to bring closure. And so people are getting older. People are living here. We're moving into a season of transition.
Yeah.
If you need to have a conversation, have it.
Please have it. Please have it. Yeah.
There are stages of grief. They are not linear. You will bounce between stages. You will revisit stages. But it's important that you don't do this or attempt to do this by yourself. You need a guide.
Yeah.
You need someone very familiar with I cannot tell you the value of grief counseling.
Yeah.
The solutions are in you, but you need a guide to just kind of help walk you through it. Every Father's Day is not easy. It is challenging. And I think that once again, it goes back to just because we're functioning doesn't mean that we're fine. It doesn't mean that everything is hunky-dory. And like even having this conversation was challenging. It's not easy. Father's Day, when you get to your father's birthday, when you get to the day that he passed, those are things that will just catch you off guard. Grief comes in waves and they are unpredictable. There'll be certain movies that I watch and I break. A lot of times there's a song that comes on and it reminds me of my dad and I break. My father's been gone to glory 10 years. Last year, I was Christmas shopping and saw a sweatsuit that I wanted to buy him. Like, it will never be normal to me that he's not here. That'll never be normal. There are certain hurts and wounds that you don't necessarily get over, but God gives you grace to live with it. Like for me, my father was my hero.
Yeah.
No one will ever replace that in my life. I'm not even going to try. But day by day, God gives me strength to live with it, to live with his will. And so sometimes we have to adjust our expectations as it pertains to grief. You're expecting for things to be like, or for you to feel a certain way.
Sure.
That's not what healing all the way is. Like, I have scars on my body from wounds. I have bones and injuries from athletics that I live with, and I'm okay with it. And that's the same way when it comes to grief and loss. There are certain things that God will just give you strength to live with.
That's sound wisdom. That is sound wisdom. Until next time.